Hi guys, I'm Jennifer. I am with Bliley's Funeral Home and I am the Education and Outreach Director. And this is Courtney.
Hi everyone, my name is Courtney Post-Nancic and I am a funeral director here at Bliley's and I specialize in advanced funeral planning. Today we're going to do a few different things. One is we're going to chat just a little bit, and then after that we'll have a time for a quick activity, and following our activity we'll have a time for question and answers. I've been working in the funeral home since about 2010, and I've seen a big change in how these family gatherings are taking place. When I first entered the funeral industry 10 years ago, it was very traditional, very dark and kind of gloomy. There was organ music, all of the traditional type of funeral pieces. And now over time, we've really seen an emphasis on personalization and families really capturing the legacy of their loved one. So we're here today to really help you learn how to do that, so that way when your time comes, you're going to have a great celebration and a nice toast to a life well lived.
And that's a great point, because this is brings like a personal story to me, which is when we lost my grandmother. We lost my grandmother about when I was a teenager, and we were, as a teenager, very wrapped up into ourselves. We didn't spend a lot of time getting to know stories, family history stories, some of the reasons why we do family traditions, some of the recipes that my grandmother had. We spent time with her, but we didn't really get to the nitty-gritty of what she was all about and what made her the person she was. And then, she passed suddenly, and I guess we always thought she'd be around. And she passed, and we never bothered to get that information and capture it. So, the information was gone. I have no way to ask her that information anymore, and it's stuff that now I really want to know, and I want to share that with my family and my friends. And so we really want to talk to you today about capturing that legacy, remembering all of those things, but not just doing it yourselves, not just sitting down and creating something yourself, but doing it with family and friends. So we have this book. Most of you should have it. It's called A Toast to a Life Well Lived, a Legacy Story. And this is your legacy story. We challenge you to complete this book. Take some time, maybe when you have family or friends come, just have them ask you one or two of the questions in here, and let them hear the answer. Even let them write it down for you, or you write it down, so that you're capturing all that information that is not going to be lost. They can go back and look at it at another time.
So Jennifer, in our society, there are some things that we don't talk about. What are some of those things?
So I would say the things that we don't talk about are, of course, we don't talk about money. I mean, we've all been told not to talk about that. Salaries, family dynamics, things like that, kind of on the hush-hush, but definitely about death. I think people think it's taboo, and it's not something to talk about with families.
It really is a hard topic because it's just really sad. It's really hard. I totally understand what you're saying. So tell me what you would think when you hear the word funeral.
So let's see. If I'm thinking about it, when I close my eyes and think about a funeral, I think of like a dark room. I think of, people crying. I think of, tissues. I think of, frozen casseroles, things like that.
I would say traditionally that's what we're trained to think about. That's what everyone's common thought would be. But let me ask you a question. If we change that word from funeral to celebration, what would you think then?
So celebration, I think of family and friends and laughter and, sharing stories, telling funny things, food, drinks. It's always about the food and the drinks.
Yeah, that's a totally different atmosphere and environment. And I think that more people would want to attend something like that than the sad, stuffy room with awkward conversations and tissues everywhere.
Yes, yeah? Especially with the tissues everywhere now.
So tell me when you picture your funeral or your life celebration, what does that look like for your family?
Well, I guess now that you talk about celebration, I guess I am trying to think of it a little bit differently. I'm thinking that, I would think I'd want my family and friends around telling funny stories, making jokes, being happy, but being supported by each other, having a minute to be sad, but also like having the day to get through the sadness and kind of come out on the other side a little bit. And as we're sitting here talking, it makes me think about my mother. She came to me the other day and said that she does not want a funeral. She doesn't want a funeral. She doesn't want us to be sad. She doesn't want people sitting around gawking and whatever. But, as we're talking about all this with the celebration and, the healing and so forth, like, do you think people really need funerals?
So yes, I do think that people do need to have funerals. There are a lot of customs and rituals that we have in our society that we really place a lot of emphasis on. Things like birthday parties and anniversary parties, graduation, things like that, where we gather as a family and celebrate that rite of passage. And I really think that funerals are one of those big events. It's one of those important things that we do in our society. And studies from grief counselors and grief professionals have really shown that it really helps society and the friends and family to gather and begin that healing process together. So it's very, very important that we do continue to have some sort of funeral ceremony.
That makes a lot of sense. What about, so as a professional, you've been doing this a long time. Mm-hmm. Tell me some of like your personal favorites, like the funerals that you've been to, maybe some of the ones that they call personalization where, people kind of put their own spin on their celebration of life.
Right. So one of my favorites, the first thing that comes to mind is we had a gentleman who passed away and he was always spotted in Hawaiian shirts. So he was very interested in Hawaiian shirts. So we asked everybody that attended to wear a Hawaiian shirt in his honor. So everyone from the minister to the guest to the funeral home staff was decked out in Hawaiian shirts.
How cute.
So fun. And I can think of one other right off the top of my head. There was the person who had passed away was a huge poker enthusiast, mm-hmm. loved playing poker. So we actually transformed our chapel space into a poker tournament. Had, card dealers everywhere and came and had a poker tournament in honor of the person who had passed away.
Wow, that's so cool. What a great idea. I bet it was really meaningful for them. Well, what about the kids? Like, what if people have grandkids or children that they are at a service? Should they bring them, first of all? Should they not bring them? And
yes.
What can you do to get them involved?
Those are great questions and something that personally means a lot to me because I was left out of funerals when I was a child. So I always, always, always encourage families to bring the children to be a part of that ceremony. And for children to be active participants in that ceremony is really important and critical for their grief process. So I've seen families choose to do like a memory hunt where they hide, whether it be like an Easter egg or a treasure box, for each of the grandchildren throughout the chapel. And we'll pause during that ceremony and let them go hunt for the memory. And then they'll come up to the podium and sort of share what that memory is with the entire group of folks that have gathered.
Oh, that's so sweet.
So sweet. And that's great way for them to interact.
So tell me, so now out of all of those, but what about you personally? Like, what is your personal favorite? What have you participated in that was like super cool?
Okay, so personal favorite touches personally for me. My husband's grandfather, when he passed away, his name was George, and he was famous for his zingy one-liners. We called them the Georgisms. So we put together a big board, and they said Georgisms, and all throughout the board had the posted one-liners that he was famous for. So everyone sort of gathered, read all of those one-liners, and kept using them throughout the entire day. So it kind of felt like we could hear his voice echoing through the walls, and it was really, really fun.
Wow, so it was almost like he was there. Yes. He was kind of there with you at the ceremony. That's so neat. That's wonderful. Okay, but now listening to all these stories, it sounds like this would take a lot of time to plan. I mean,
Yes.
it sounds like, this is something that, I don't know. I mean, it's not something you can throw together in 3 days. So, I mean, how long does it take to plan something like this?
So, question for you. Have
Okay.
you ever planned a wedding or a family reunion or anything like that?
Oh my gosh, yes. And it's a nightmare. Family dynamics and everybody's opinions and everything going on. Yeah, it's a nightmare.
Right. So I will tell you that a lot of people don't get ahead of the game and plan in advance. So they're putting these things together within a matter of 3 days and having to cross every T and dot every I. And it's really, really hard to do when you've just experienced a loss
Oh.
and are upset and emotional.
I feel like that would be really, really hard.
It really is.
So I have a question. I feel like it's the question that's on everybody's mind. And I kind of feel like it's the question people ask because they don't know what else to ask about funerals. So the question to you is, how much does a funeral cost?
I'm going to do that thing again where I throw it back to you. How much would you think that a wedding would cost?
Well, so I would say my wedding was, a few people gathered by the river. We had a small little service with family and did something afterwards. We all kind of went out to dinner. But I'm in the process of planning my sister's wedding right now, and that young child wants to go to the Bahamas with champagne toasts and flying people all over the world, and she wants the most expensive caterer and a live band and whatever, and it's probably going to cost more than my house. So I guess I can't even say how much a wedding costs because it depends on I see what you're saying. It depends on the person.
Yes, it does. And it really just depends what your wishes are and what your family is really needing during that time. So there's not going to be one target cost that I can give you to even get you started on that because it really is catered to what it is that you're looking for in that event.
Okay, so kind of like a menu. Like, here's a list of all the things that we can do. Pick the things that you want, and each of them have a cost. So that does make sense to me now. I get it now.
Yep.
So Courtney, what would you say is your best advice? What would you tell people kind of, these are the 2 things that you think that they should do?
That's really easy. Step 1, this book, the Life Story book. Do that with your family. Share those memories with your family members as well. Spend some time doing that to really pull out those legacies and the things that are the best memories, things that you want to have shared and talked about during that ceremony. The second thing that I would recommend to anyone would to be meet with one of the advanced planning specialists at your funeral home so that way you can put together an intentional plan so that when the time of death does occur, you can come into the funeral home and there will be a plan in place and it's a roadmap. They just kind of follow it to get them through that first few days of the acute loss period.
Wow. Okay. But so let me ask you, in your experience working, as a funeral director, but also as an advanced care planner, would you say that when a family comes in that they're like disappointed or upset or I don't know, do they feel slighted when they walk in and the person has already made a plan for them?
Absolutely not. Absolutely not at all. Every time that I will pull one of those plans out and bring it into a family after they've just experienced a loss, there's a unanimous sigh of relief when we show them that. They are so thankful that they do not have to provide that information, make those decisions, and answer all of those questions. It is something that every time they are thankful that someone had the forethought to do that ahead of time.
Wow. And I bet it gives them some time to kind of heal and be with their family instead of worrying about a lot of little teeny details that, people don't really like to look at. Well, thank you.
Of course. It was great chatting with you.
Yes. Thanks, guys.